Julian, I want to start by asking you what brought you to visiting the story, the subject of Vincent van Gogh in his final days as a film.
Really, I have no idea.
Do you have a question to ask the director?
Yeah, the question was, what would I ask the director? Yeah. Well, it seemed, first of all, I didn't want to make a movie about Vincent van Gogh. I think that everybody, one of the reasons, I think everybody thinks they know everything about Vincent van Gogh. And so it seemed to be an impossibility. And Jean-Claude and I thought, we were at the Musée d'Orsay looking at a show of Vincent van Gogh paintings from Arles and drawings by Antonin Artaud. And he had some kind of an epiphany at that moment, which he can explain to you, and then I can elaborate on that. But you want to do that?
Yes, it was the day the museum was closed, and Julian succeeded in having it open, just for the two of us. And we were facing, Julian and me, a self-portrait by Van Gogh, very closely. Van Gogh was here, Julian there, and I was here. And I never thought before in my life that I would ever feel such a totally new emotion in front of a painting. It was as if Van Gogh was alive and listening to us, because Julian was telling me things I would never have thought about, technical things, technical details about the way the painting was done. For instance, he was telling me, Jean-Claude, you should notice that he used 3 different blues. A ceruleum, a Prussian blue, and the marine blue. Here. And also look carefully. All around the eye, there is a very thin red line that you don't see from a certain distance, and so on. And it was as if Van Gogh was listening to us. It was very impressive. I almost heard Van Gogh's heart beating. In silence, speaking about him, he was there, listening to the revealing of some of his secrets. And a painter talking to me about another painter that way. I was already almost 80 years old, and I thought that never I would feel such an emotion in my life. And when we were slowly going away, walking away, I had the feeling that Van Gogh was following us with his eyes. It was very impressive, and the film was born that very day.
I just wanted to say I had no idea he was feeling any of those things. I really didn't, and he didn't tell me about that actually until about 2 months ago.
You didn't need to know.
I guess I didn't. We were working on a need-to-know basis, and I guess I didn't need to know. But what happened when we were looking around at the paintings, there were maybe, I don't know if there were 20 paintings in the show, whatever, but I had the thought that if we approached making a movie, or the structure of a movie, to where you looked at each painting, and each painting was a vignette. And when you go to a show, you see 20 or 15 paintings, and at the end you walk out and you have an accumulative feeling about what just happened. And I thought if we did it like that and wrote these vignettes, we could have a structure that would be, so it was not a biography and it wasn't an ordinary narrative. And at a certain moment after we had started to work, the thing also is he has, an encyclopedic mind about all sorts of things that have nothing to do with Vincent van Gogh. And as we would talk about things, I mean, he'd be telling me about the Gospels and that nobody knew who Christ was until 30 or 40 years after he was born. I thought, that's dialogue. Or about Vietnam, I thought it was great to have Vincent van Gogh talk to somebody about Vietnam, even though it was called Tonkin in those days. And so we had all of these opportunities, I couldn't even list all of them, to where we just had this plethora of life to kind of infuse in this. And I guess I also had the opportunity to say things about painting that maybe Van Gogh didn't say, but I'd like to hear him say. Also, I mean, if you look at it, and then there was a moment when we were kind of had all these things, and Louise got involved and started to get involved in the structure of, and also there's a lot of things that happen in nature that kind of imbued the movie with a, I mean, I think what happens, I don't know, I don't explain, I guess we're over-explaining everything already, but there was lots of parts where there's no talking, and there's music, and there's nature, and there's a horizontality of that, and then there are big heads that talk that are like the portraits, and so there's a kind of equivalences, and I guess ultimately the film is told in the first person. And so instead of the movie being about Van Gogh, you feel like you are Van Gogh, and I thought that that was an interesting possibility. And then, I don't know, is that an answer?
That's an answer. Okay. That works. Willem, I remember when you were here last year with Florida Project, and you were talking about how excited you were about this shoot and how it felt like it was going to be a really special film. Okay. And I'm wondering if you and Oscar...
Excuse me. Jean-Claude can't hear.
Oh, okay, sorry. And I'm wondering if you and Oscar and Rupert could talk about the environment on the set and that Julian created.
He wants to know about the environment on the set that I created.
Well, I went very rarely on the set, you know. Yeah. When the screenwriter...
he was asking those guys.
Not to me.
No.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
No,
but we can talk about that later.
Anyway.
I just want to say that when the screenwriter is called, and to call on the set, it's a very bad sign. It means that something goes wrong, like, you know, that something has to be changed, and so on. So.
Except Louise was there all the time. So.
Yeah.
One thing that was very particular about the way we were shooting, I've known Julian for a long time, and generally speaking, we had a very strong script. We had very specific texts, but we'd go there in the morning, and there would be the place that we were shooting, and Julian would, and others of the team, including me, would kind of be in the place and kind of nest and kind of get it to a place where it felt like it was ready to film in. That was the first part of the day. Then we'd shoot the scene actually quite quickly. Yeah. And sometimes we were even done by lunch. And then we'd have half a day to go out in nature and walk around, and I could paint some, and we'd invent some things. So that wasn't a normal day, but that often happened, and that was very special because there was this structure, but then there was also this looseness at the same time. And I liked that very much. It kept things very fluid, and it didn't feel like a movie, a traditional movie. It felt like we were getting together things that we were interested in and making ourselves available to it, and then stuff would happen, which sounds kind of irresponsible, but interesting things were happening because we were shooting in places that he was. There were actually landscapes that were recognizable still to this day from his paintings. And then, of course, for me, I was learning to paint, so I was painting. So it was a very strong experience, and I usually don't think beyond. Of course, you always want the work to be received well, but I wasn't thinking about that. I was just thinking about enjoying it.
Yeah, actually, one of those days that we we worked when we were out there on that beautiful landscape, painting together, and as Gauguin, I'm painting you, a portrait of you. We worked for a while. I think that whole first half of the day worked on that scene when we're talking about the future and what we want to do, and you know, our philosophies about painting. And we did the scene so many times, going up this side of a mountain, or the side of the hill there, and worked on it, and you know, found a lot of different things, and then towards the end of the day, there was the idea to maybe, why not just try doing the scene a totally different way. Let's just walk down this one area. You know, we'd already gotten it, basically. I mean, you had said, we got it, we can go home, or we could try it again in a different way. And so we decided to do that, and that's where that whole, you know, us walking through those olive trees, right? Walking through those trees, and then ending up on a cliff and taking a whiz off the side of the hill there. I mean, that was all just at the very end of the day that we decided to do this little extra thing, and that ended up being the scene in the film. And it felt like there was that energy, at least when I was there, absolutely, of invention, and we would do what was there, and then there was just so much room to find new things and to go a little deeper, and that was really thrilling for me.
Yeah, I remember similarly shooting in the mental institution in Arles,
Yes.
and Julian invited the doctors and nurses and patients to be part of the scene, and the places where Van Gogh himself was institutionalized. So it had ghosts in the walls already, but to have the current staff and all the patients as a part of the scene, there was this one man who was compelled to come and shake my hand as I was supposed to be entering the scene, and was right in the way of the camera. Mm-hmm. And Julian, being Julian, just would completely allow this and encourage it, and it became a far more thrilling experience to walk into this place where you know your brother is really suffering, mm-hmm. and there are people who are dealing with their own torments all around, but also thrilled to be a part of it, and it really felt like something incredibly akin. Hadn't really changed very much since Van Gogh was there.
Mm. Louise, were you assembling the film as you were shooting?
Say again?
Were you assembling the film as you were shooting?
Well,
You have to speak into the microphone.
Sorry, in my head, I guess, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But we started to cut the movie after we finished shooting the film.
Yeah. And was the cutting a similarly organic experience? I would imagine that it was.
Yeah, it was very organic. We started cutting because we were waiting for an editor to come on board, but we couldn't really wait to see the material. Mm-hmm. So I put an Avid on my laptop, and we started to put the scenes together. And when the editor came on board, we had already put the movie together and knew what it was about. Mm-hmm. So it was very organic.
I mean, basically, we never stopped. And we edited the movie on an airplane in Mexico and Costa Rica, wherever the hell we went. And by the time we got to where Juliette Welfling was, who edited The Diving Bell and Miral,
yes,
we were so far gone that, and she's a great editor, but what was happening is she was going to take out of the film everything that characterized it as itself. So she edited the movie, and also that scene that you're talking about, essentially I was trying to shoot that scene on the top of that hill, but I guess Louise's perspective on that was that it belonged in the olive grove. So I think that, I mean, I'm speaking for you right now, but and rather than editing as we were going along, I think it was reconstructing the movie every day, and we'd go off. And for example, what happened is we had short filming days because we lost some financing at a certain moment. So they said, "Can you shoot it 7-hour days?" I said, "Yeah, I can do that." And we would get done about magic hour every day. So all of a sudden we were there and we had a camera and we had a brilliant DP named Benoît Delhomme who was ready to do anything. He never said, I can't do it. He said yes. Whatever I asked him, he never, no wasn't part of his vocabulary.
Yep.
And sometimes we'd be shooting something and I'd have to scream, can the actor and the DOP come back? You guys are out in the woods somewhere. I mean, they just wouldn't stop shooting. And so what would happen is Louise and I would look around for places in nature to find things. And for example, one day Willem walked out. We went to look at one location, and then Willem and Benoît looked near this levee, and there were these incredible reeds that were orange if you looked from one side of them. And they didn't look like anything from the other side. And he said, would we come out here and take a look at this? And we went out there, and it was so obvious that he was supposed to stand in those reeds and stick his arms out in the air. So there were things like that that happened. I mean, every day, I guess. We didn't put all of it in the movie, but I think every day we had opportunities that were... the landscape was as much a protagonist of the film, I think, as any people were.
Yeah. Let's open it up for some questions in the audience. Yeah, right there. 1 second.
First, congratulations to all of you. My question for Julian Schnabel is about the camera and the way it narrates. Could you elaborate a little on, for example, was I seeing right that at the beginning, at times, the bottom part of the screen seemed to be a bit gauzy, and towards the end of the film, more so? Was this intended as a way to truly make this in the first person singular, or is my vision today not completely right?
No, it was a mistake.
Seriously?
No, obviously, Annette, it's intentional. I wanted to make his point of view specific and particular, and walked into a vintage store and bought some sunglasses one day, and when I walked outside, I realized that they were bifocals. I looked down at the floor, and there was a step in the grass. I thought, now that looks good. So I gave Benoît the glasses, and I said, can you put these on the lens? But since they were a little small for the lens, we built a split diopter, so the depth of field would be different on the bottom and the top. And I think what that achieved was, I think it functioned in a lot of different ways, because I think when Oscar was saying to Willem that he was leaving, it kind of felt more exacerbated in some way, and it seemed like he was crying. When he meets the girl on the road, he seemed pretty upset or charged up, or when he went to see his brother at the end of the, after he got out of the hospital. So I think that there's something about also a sense of the fear of going mad that is part of the movie. I think the notion of coming back or being brought back to the asylum in that carriage in a repetitive way has to do with a kind of Jacob's ladder effect that you do when you have I guess you're nervous about something, but it seems to sort of slip in and out in a illogical way, which is, I think, the way I perceive that, whether it's madness or anxiety. I just think but I do think that Vincent was very scared of that, and so no, it wasn't a mistake, and yes, I really like the way that looks, and it was a great thing for me. I mean, sometimes we could pan across the landscape and the whole bottom would be all blurry, and I was like looking at the sea or something. Any more questions? Yes?
From Katrine. The microphone's coming.
The relationship between the brothers is truly remarkable. I don't remember having seen brotherly love presented quite as strongly as here. Could you talk a little bit, especially about that scene when the two of you are in bed together, hugging each other? It's absolutely remarkable. Can you talk about that?
Well, maybe Rupert. No, Rupert, I think it would be...
What? You want me to talk about it? Why?
Whenever you want to.
Oh, okay. I said why.
Why?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's I can talk about it for a minute, and then
All
you
right.
can talk about it. How long is this press conference supposed to be?
We got another couple hours, so no.
Okay.
I mean, we got a
you-
premiere coming up.
You know, when I wanted Rupert to be in this movie, we didn't know each other. I mean, I knew everybody else, but I didn't know Rupert. But I'd seen him in Homeland and thought he was amazing, and I thought he could do
You
anything.
can applaud.
But he asked me at the beginning, because there's not a lot of talking that he does, but I thought that what he was going to do and what he would show would have so much feeling he wouldn't have to say a whole lot. And I think what is really remarkable is how much feeling Rupert feels, and the kind of what you're saying exactly, how much love came out of him, and the kind of affection that. So there is no. It's very interesting to see how somebody could be really, really still, and really deep, and really loving, and it just speaks to whatever's going on. I think everybody in this movie has a rich inner life, and these. They bring that with them to the film. I mean, every one of these guys just. Excuse me, please. Yes.
May I try to ask a question and to answer it?
Sure.
There is an old story between painting and movies, because a painting is still, doesn't move, and movies move. It's an old story which goes back to the prehistoric caves, when the first painters tried to give the illusion of movement by a series of heads of deer or tigers running one after the other. And one of the attempts, one of the tries of many filmmakers has been to try to reach this, this sort of motion inside the immobility. And when Julian started making film at the end of the 80s, he was already a recognized painter all over the world. And he tried to go to make films. And he made very beautiful films, 5 that we know. In one of these films, Before Night Falls, with Javier Bardem, I have seen a moment which reminds me, strangely enough, of the prehistoric caves. The moment Javier is prisoner inside a cell, very narrow, and he cannot move at all. I had never seen in all my life such a strong scene about feeling myself prisoner as if I were the actor, the character himself. That was the first time that motion and no motion would confound and be one. And I'm sure that at the end of these 10 years when you made film, and including this one, something now I'm not looking at your paintings from the 80s with the same eyes. I see something different. I see motions, movements, that I couldn't see before. And maybe because of this film, where we try once again to do the impossible, to make the motionless move and the moving be immobile. That's something that strikes me a lot. It's an old story between painting and people like Poussin, like Matisse tried, and talk about and wrote about this impossibility of making the movie something that moves motionless, and to be motionless moving. That's something which I find in this film, maybe for the first time.
I guess you asked the question and you answered it.
Yeah. That's why I'm not asking you any question.
No, but maybe I don't know. There's something that I guess that there's something that happens in the film that there's moments when the movie goes black. And for me, maybe for everybody, I would imagine that when you wake up in the morning, before you start talking to anybody, you are alive, you are thinking about something, you hear these thoughts in your head, and then you start, the lights come on, or you look at someone else, or you start talking, and then, but I think that there are these stoppages that are in the film. And in the blackness of that, something's happening to the audience. I think that you sit there and you go, well, is there something wrong with the film? I mean, I know that some of the people from CBS that were checking the film we sent is it, why did the film go black? And then it comes back on, and then they realize it's part of the movie. I think when you sit in it, what he's talking about makes sense to me in the way that we're all about 6 feet tall. Some are a little shorter, some are a little taller, but if you stand and look at a painting that's 16 feet tall, we're all sort of looking at it from the same place. And we have a perspective, I mean, it's a physical thing that occurs. And there's a physical way that you can look at a film. I mean, we're all sitting in front of this big screen, and we're in the dark. And when the film stops, and then it takes you out of the movie from it. But then when it comes back, you have to focus again in another way. And these kinds of stoppages are, I don't know, I mean, if you've ever been on an airplane when you didn't feel good, and then you were hoping that you'd stop hyperventilating or whatever, and then it kind of goes away and comes back. There's a physical property to actually the equivalence of nothingness and somethingness. And I think by the time you get to the end of the movie, there is a kind of rhythm that, I mean, it was for me, I mean, that occurs, and that, so you have a physical relationship with it rather than just somebody telling you a story. It's something's happening to you. And maybe that has to do with being still, that maybe it has to do with sitting in your seat. And when we were shooting the movie, I think a normal editor would look at the film and say, well, that person's talking to the camera, but he's not talking to the camera. Well, shouldn't these things match up? Well, no, I don't think they do. I think that every time somebody was talking to Willem, it was that somebody was interrupting his reverie or disturbing something or intervening in some way as if there was something that was interrupting something. So I don't know if you want to talk about that or anybody has questions about that, but all of these people were being filmed. They were talking to the camera. They weren't talking to another actor. And that is another kind of activity where, I mean, actors will talk about how they get something. I mean, Chris Walken and Dennis Hopper talked about how they would dance together doing this scene in True Romance or whatever. But I mean, these people are bringing whatever is going on inside of them and just talking to the camera. Every one of these guys. And if there were some women here, I would say every one of these people. Mm-hmm. But Emmanuelle Seigner is not sitting here. But it's amazing to have them, I don't know, I guess I didn't see the movie with you today, but it's sort of like you're sitting in a jewelry box and these big heads stare in there and look at you. I felt like the portraits were talking and the landscapes were, and I guess there's never any music when people are talking, and the music is something that's probably worth talking about also. But do you want Rupert to ask your question
actually,
now?
There's a lot more to talk about, but we actually have to wrap it up.
Really, that's a pity. You didn't.
Yeah,
Oscar
we have
didn't
to.
even
We got to
say
get down for
anything.
the premiere, man.
Huh?
Sorry. Thanks,
Thank
you guys,
you.
for the movie.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.